What's up? Welcome to Dream Firm Spotlight. My name is Tyler S. Clark. We are here to cover 7 lessons you can learn from the Big Four to grow your small firm much, much faster. And to start off with a statistic that was a little mind-blowing when I read it, the Big Four, okay, they accounted for $186 billion in 2022, while the rest of accounting, literally everyone else, accounted for $143 billion. So the Big Four is $40 billion larger than every other firm combined. And when you hear that, you shouldn't be thinking that's unfair. We should be thinking, instead of envious, we should be thinking curious. So what can we learn from what they do, how they operate, ideally leave behind all the things that we don't like about what they do, right? Because there's plenty of those, but there's a lot we can learn from as well. And we're going to go through 7 of those lessons right now. So the very first one that we're going to lead off with here, is something a lot of firms need a lot more of, which is structure, okay? The only way that you can possibly hope to have a business that is worth even multi-6 figures, let alone whatever a billion is, 9 figures, that is going to require a lot of thinking about how do things work, when are they deployed, who is responsible for this. We've got a lot of videos on the YouTube channel about system building, but the Big Four, for all their faults, are very good at having a lot of structure for how they get talent involved, how they handle their sales processes, for how they delegate work, for being able to, yes, meet deadlines, for being able to keep people in certain areas and in certain roles and not feel like we need to have jack of all trades running all over the place. So structure, structure, structure. Think about the size of certain operations. They can only exist by the strength of the structure that they operate by. So lean into this. Look at the areas in your firm that tend to be weaker. In other words, weaker just means they're not as defined as they need to be. They don't have any structure. If your marketing plan has no structure, if your sales process doesn't have any structure, if your onboarding, if your talent retention, if your ascension process, if your pricing, if your scope creep, all of these things are just another way of saying, like, do we define what is acceptable in the parameters of this area of the business? And if we go, I'm not really so sure, then there is no structure, okay? So that's the first point. Now, this next point might come as a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people, and I probably should have brought a much bigger eraser, but that's okay. The next point here is going to be related to something that I don't think a lot of people are going to agree with me, but I'm going to provide a little bit of an anecdotal example that should hopefully bring a few people to my side, okay? A lot of people will say that the Big Four has a rotten culture to its core. And if you browse the accounting subreddit, it is nothing but endless horror stories about how terrible the Big Four is. And I'm not here to belittle those people's very real experiences. It is certainly not for everyone. But if I were to summarize what culture is about, it is not always purely about inclusivity. A lot of cultures are about inclusivity. But the Big Four sets a culture of very high expectations. And going back to the first point about structure, they make sure that when you reach those expectations, which may sound ridiculous to a lot of people, but to certain people, they're exciting. To people who want to be high performers, for people who love to work a lot, for people who love to be in those types of environments, that's a culture that speaks to them. And again, that is not by accident. This is something that they've defined and developed over time to weed certain people out and to allow other people to excel and accelerate and go up the ranks. And to this point, I have a very good friend who is an absolute rock star at PwC. And when I say rock star, I mean she's on track to be one of the youngest partners ever in the company. She's just an absolute workhorse. And when I say she's a lifer for PwC, like, I've tried to lure her to be our CFO in our company. I'm like, her name's Yana. I'm like, Yana, why don't you, sorry, we've got people to let into the live room. Yana, why don't you come, don't you hate it? Like, all the hours, all the commuting, all the office politics, don't you hate that about the Big Four? And she literally looks at me like I'm crazy. She's like, Tyler, I love it. I love that I know how many hours I have to work. I know exactly what my pay is going to be. I know exactly what my partner track line looks like. I love the events. I love the social things. I love everything about it. If you cannot have someone who can be like, I love everything we do. I love the direction we're going in. You have no culture. And in order to have something that is very large, it can't just be about debits and credits. It can't just be about how much I'm paying you. It has to be about a larger vision that they see themselves as a part of and that they're very excited to participate in. And again, back to point one, they know the structure. They know if I do this, I'll get this output. If I do this, I'm on partner track. If I do this, I will have this outcome. So again, as much as people want to be like the culture is bad, the culture is excellent for the people that they want to be a part of their organization. And that goes back to just making sure we take the time to properly define that. So that brings us, I'm definitely going to get a bigger eraser for the next time I do this. This is like ridiculous. So the next one is going to be, but pipeline. So there are really two types of pipelines that the Big Four is absolutely fantastic at. And I'll just go ahead and jot them down here. So the first one is they have to have an extremely robust pipeline. Okay. They are at every job fair for every meaningful college in the nation. They are constantly recruiting. They are always investing in the best way to solve a problem for any entrepreneur, whether you're a billion-dollar company or you're looking to make your first buck. They're investing in who, not how. How can we make sure that we have more people to help us both at the highest level, right? How do we attract high-level talent? That's a different sort of pipeline. It's recruiting, right? And then how do we make sure that the lower levels of the rungs, as it's referred to on the accounting subreddits, the meat grinder, right? It's like you're coming in, they say you're making less than a McDonald's employee, right? You're getting paid like 45, 50 grand, but you're working 80 hours a week, ladies and gentlemen, right? Like you sometimes not the best deal. We get that. But they are making sure that even the people that are falling out, there's always fresh bodies to come in and replace that. That is not by accident. When you have a really high standard for your culture, when you have a very strong structure that allows people to ascend that, you have to make sure that you have more people coming in than you have going out, which we know is probably not always going to be the case, given the drop in the number of CPAs and the interest in accounting for a while. So I think they're in for a rude awakening on this. But even still, imagine that you have a culture in which you're not losing more people than you're gaining, and you're keeping them and you're retaining them and you're incentivizing them and you're getting the most out of them, because it's not that they're afraid to get fired. They want to give you more because they want to be there. That's the best of both worlds. So I don't think we need to look at that and necessarily be like, oh, we should do that. I like high standards, but I want people to believe that they should be there. And that's how you really get the most out of your talent. You don't get the most based out of a fear-based culture. At least that's not what I believe. The second part of this is there is no shortage of clients that want to work with the Big Four, okay? So the second part of their pipeline here is they are actively incentivizing, going back to point one, structure for all of their massive workforces to bring work into the company. They have no shortage. And part of this is what I'm going to a little bit later on, but you know the names of the Big Four, right? Like they're not that are unknown. And part of the reason they're not unknown is because they're always consistently putting their name and their brand out into the market, partially just because of the sheer number of people they hire, but also because of the number of different things that they can do, because there's a lot of things that small firms can't do that only the Big Four can do, that can only serve a certain portion of the market, which brings me back to like the way you fill your pipeline is you offer specialties, specialized services, niche specific services. There are things that I could drop a Big Four client into a lot of small firms' laps and they literally would be like, I can't do anything with this. Like, what are you, out of your mind? So my point again is like the pipeline is not something that is by accident. It is consciously developed so that they can facilitate both the amount of work that they have and make sure that they can enforce the culture that they want to set. Again, whether you agree with that or not is a completely separate point. You know what? I'm going to do something crazy. I'm just going to go get a bigger eraser. Give me 1 second. See, we can come up with better solutions. All right, look at that. Look at how much time we're going to save on the next 4. Fantastic. All right. So next one, and I covered this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to re-emphasize it now because I think it's by far the most important aspect of this, and I'm going to put a little caveat on it. So this is the biggest problem with small business owners in general, and guilty, right? Oftentimes I'm talking more to myself than I am talking to you guys. Who, not how. We can stay focused on the tiniest, minute details related to growing our business, right? I've got to get the sales script just right, or I've got to really make sure that I know every single tax law that's ever been written before I hire a tax manager. And that is absolutely silly. To grow quickly, which is what the Big Four does, okay? They are masters at making sure that they hire the right people for the right job. They get people who have experience, certified killers, they incentivize them appropriately, and they keep them in their zone of genius. So to give you an example of this, right? You don't want someone who is a tax manager or a very high-level tax expert to now go and run your audit division, or to go and put their hands into the accounting side. It doesn't make sense. So the larger your business grows, the more important it is to have specialists. And I would argue that's even more important when you start out. Yes, maybe in the beginning you have an administrator, a VA, who's sort of a jack of all trades. But as soon as you get past that very first part-time hire, it's specialist, 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 all until your org chart is filled out. And the way that you determine who should you be hiring for, right, is what's the biggest constraint of the business. So the biggest issue most accounting firms have is they focus on the wrong problem for too long. They think they're not good enough, right? They think that they need more certifications. They think that they need more fulfillment software. And the thing is, they have no one buying their services, or people who are buying them aren't buying them at the right price point. Or they have a lot of people who are interested in their services, but they don't have a manager, and they're the manager, and they're trying to manage like 7 to 10 people, and you can only manage 5 to 7 effectively. And so they're constantly focusing on like, I've got to fill this tiny little gap, when in reality, you just need to go like, you're one hire away from all the growth you could ever hope for in your life. I truly believe that. When you hire that person and they can have the right way of doing it and going through it and following whatever it is that you do, you set the expectation, you give them the structure to excel in the role, guess what? You grow so much faster because the most precious resource is always time, always. So again, that's to me a very big one that the Big Four does a really nice job with, is just making sure that people stay in their zone of genius and that they don't try and take people and turn them into jack of all trades. Okay, number 5. This one should be a very good lesson for everybody who watches this channel. Okay. No tiny clients. The Big Four does not take on $100 tax returns. I'm not being hyperbolic. Okay, there are firms that literally charge $100 for a tax return. They do not take on bookkeeping clients that are doing $100 a month. They don't waste their team's time or their time with businesses that are doing, and they know their dream client profile, right? Like, they know who they're targeting, but let's be honest, they're not touching anyone that's doing, generally speaking, less than 7 figures a year in revenue. They're just not, because they know that it is not even worth the time, because the companies can't pay the rates that they need to be able to support the growth of the company. No tiny clients. They're not called the tiny 4, are they? No, they're called the Big Four, because they don't take tiny clients, okay? I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's like the simplest and shortest point I'm going to make today. No tiny clients for the Big Four. Sounds obvious, but for a lot of people it's not. All right, so this one is a little bit different, and it might be a little counterintuitive, but I'm going to explain what I mean here. Oh no! The hourly billing model! Time equals profit. What do I mean by that? So the reason that financial planning firms sell for such a higher multiple, generally speaking, than accounting firms is there is way less labor cost associated with the deliverable. In accounting, the labor cost is very high, and you can AI me till the cows come home. People have been AIing me for the last 10 years. Still not true. Not sure when it will be. Probably will be in the future, but definitely not in the next 5 years, in my opinion, at least. And this to me is important because if you ask any like Big Four manager, senior associate, anyone, right? Like, they will be able to be like, my hourly rate is $400 an hour. And they're very proud of it. Now, they of course don't make $400 an hour. That's the billable rate that they provide for the client. But part of this is in the lesson, right? That if you spend more money, right? The value appreciation, how people think through what you are selling them is higher. If I am working with a Big Four consultant and I'm paying the Big Four $300 an hour, maybe that person's seeing, like $70 an hour of that or whatever it is, I am already expecting a much higher set of results that are associated with that. And what's interesting is that since they are able to track time, they have a very high emphasis on billable and chargeable hours, it's one of the things that you can measure. So going back to structure and culture and the main points from the beginning is that there's an old saying I like is what gets measured gets managed and what gets managed gets done. And if we have a high labor cost associated with deliverables, which we do in accounting, I wish it wasn't, but we do. Even if we leverage technology really well, there's still a higher labor cost to get to the end result than other professional services. But when we measure the primary driver of the cost, the time of the team, we can manage it more effectively, which means we can drive more of what we want, which is more profitability for the company. That's why charge hours are such a big deal in the Big Four. And to be perfectly frank, I'm not a huge proponent or fan of the hourly billing model from the selling time. I would never suggest to a client like, hey, you should sell based on an hourly model. I would never say that. But if I am going to be a good manager and a business owner, I have to have, and this is just, standard accounting, if you're not measuring the cost basis for your product or delivery, and the biggest cost basis is the time of your team, you have no idea realistically what your profit margins are. So even if you're just measuring it on the back end to ensure a certain degree of profitability, I recommend a minimum of 3, ideally 5x cost to deliver. But if you don't know what your cost to deliver is, how can you possibly hit that number? You can't. And the Big Four is ruthless about this. Right? They got a lot of partners to pay. They got a lot of people that they got to take care of. And so the meat grinder at the low level ensures that enough profit flows up to the top to keep the partners happy and the train moving forward. So anyway, again, that might sound weird because I'm generally very anti-time billing, but that's not say the same thing. I'm very anti-time tracking, which is the difference. Cool. Man, this eraser is just like right tool for the right job. It's amazing. All right. So this is the last one, and I'm going to spend a little extra time on this one. Okay. Feels weird writing that word by itself down at the bottom, like creep. But no/slow scope creep. Okay. Nothing will kill the love of an agency business, which is what you run. Okay. Agency essentially means it's better in my hands than it is in yours, which is the standard for accounting and tax. No/low scope creep means that the Big Four has a very good sales process to ensure that they are properly scoping projects prior to agreeing and implementing any sort of services. They have a lot of fail-safes in place to ensure that they get paid. They have very, very good discovery processes to build out the size of the project, literally the scope of the project. So how do they do that? Okay. If you have ever been a part of like consulting in general, and I'll even give an example from earlier today, that this is what professional services do really well to be able to grow quickly. They don't deliver the services that most businesses deliver for free. They charge for them. They create an experience around them. They don't jump into the QuickBooks file and do an analysis for free. They don't review the last 2 years' tax returns for free. They don't do an hour of consulting for free. They don't do those things because they realize, going back to point 6, right? Time equals profit. Okay? If we don't control how we deliver the gold that is in our brains that we take for granted, and I always use the analogy, if a client walked into your office and you had a brick of gold on your desk, and they said, "Can I have that brick of gold?" You would look at them like they were out of their minds. And you'd be like, "Absolutely not. I paid really good money to get this brick of gold on my desk." But then a client walks in and they go, "Can I have that brick of gold in your head?" And you don't even think to say no. You don't even think to be like, "Actually, you know what? I spent a lot of time and money to get this brick of gold in my head." Obviously, analogy. But no, I'm not just going to give that to you. We have to be able to come to an agreement on how you access it. What the trade is that makes it worth your time and my time to even have the conversation. So point being is, how do you do that? How does the Big Four do it? So they have a bunch of different names for it, but generally speaking, it's known as a discovery process or a problem analysis, or, there's a whole bunch of marketing lingo associated with it. We have this offered to us today, and just to provide some context, we are getting ready to do some architectural stuff to the house and whatever. Talked to a bunch of architects who came in, farted around, did a bunch of stuff for free, didn't work with them. One guy comes in, he's like, "It's $5K for me to do this work. I'm going to do this. Most of the things the other people either said they were going to do, did a little bit of, and I was like, wow, this is really structured, going back to point one, right? There's structure to this. It makes me excited, makes me feel like they know what they're doing. They're charging for it, so I feel there's a higher level of value. I'm going to be emotionally invested in it. And I was like, this is a good idea. It was $5,000 compared to the other people who were doing relatively the same thing for free. And I'm sure you've had similar experiences where if someone gives you something for free, you have a low to no appreciation for it. And then you even move into the paid service side of it. You may even agree to someone who's done something for free, and you all of a sudden feel like you don't know what you're getting, what they're getting, because they didn't even set the expectations on the first thing that they did. And so they're not going to be very good at setting the structure or the expectations on the next thing that they're going to do. So it gives you a much better understanding of how professional this person is, how professional this organization is. So what we do with our clients is we teach them how to package and bundle the things that every other firm normally does for free. Giving a quote is something you do for free usually. Literally, you take all the time, all the energy, and be like, "Here's my quote. Here's my fancy software that I bought that allows me to do quotes." And we never hear from them again. Right? We wasted all that time to never even hear from the person again. It drives me up a wall. Because if we just change the approach, the structure of how we do it, we will be able to properly scope the engagement. It is a service to literally understand someone's situation with the immense amount of gold that's in your brain applied to their situation. And then once you have that understanding, they have the understanding that you're legit, that you're not someone who's going to fumble around, increase their price, feel like they don't know what they're getting, don't know when they're going to get it, don't know how they're going to get it. They don't even know. But now they're invested in the education process, which brings me to my final point. The Big Four, and this is not another point, but this is just a bonus point for everybody here, okay? The Big Four is actually pretty good at education, okay? That might sound weird, but the reason that you don't have scope creep is because the sales process now becomes an educative process. Okay, if you are educating the prospect and they're invested in understanding the education, right? The difference between going to the YouTube University for free versus going to the Harvard education with no scholarship, you're putting your butt in that seat, you're listening, you're taking notes, you're invested in receiving the education compared to the Harvard University online that's for free for everyone that very few people ever do anything with. Same thing is true for now your prospective clients. There's no scope creep, because they understand what it takes to solve the problem and why the investment has to be larger at the next step. After you review the returns, after you've been able to analyze their QBO file, after you've given them the custom proposal, after you've done an hour of consulting to truly understand their situation, answer their primary pain points, after you've been able to analyze if they even need a tax plan, after you've been able to do all those things, now they go, I get it. I get why I have to do this. And what's fascinating about that is after you do that, here's what, right? Whereas previously, okay, let's just say very quickly, this is a terrible marker. I don't think anyone can see that. Okay. So if this is, let's just call this like appreciation, okay? This is like how much I can't really write, appreciation, and this is dollar amount, okay? Obviously we want to go further here, and we want to go further. We want them to appreciate what you do, and we want them to spend more, okay? You probably can't see that all the way down here, but this is a dollar amount, right? So dollar is down this direction, okay? This is dollar, okay? And then it goes out this way. When you do this, let me back up. When you do it the other way, when you give stuff away for free and then you just give them a proposal, you're normally going to be hovering down here. Low dollar amount, low appreciation. They don't understand. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know why they're spending the amount they are. And so they feel confused. They feel like they're always overspending for whatever reason. And then what we want to do is we want to move this bullet point all the way up here. But you can't just be like, well, it's worth this much. You can't just be like, it is worth this much. And so what you do is you have a lower dollar amount that is what you charge first, right? This is the first thing. It's like, I don't really get it. But then what they do is through the process of the delivery of this experience, which we call a financial 360, but it's just a placeholder for whatever you call it. It doesn't really matter. You now are able to move the overall LTV, right, which is just lifetime value. You're able to move that way higher up as opposed to starting here with your monthly price or whatever it is, or your discounted back work. So you sell the analysis and then you sell the implementation. And if you want to take it even one step further, you then sell the MRR, the monthly recurring revenue. So this is really more of a three-step sales process, to be clear. Implementation, discovery, implementation, cleaning up the books, doing the back taxes, putting the work in for the tax plan, everything associated with like literally like the one-time service, and then boom, now you get to move into MRR, because the only reason that this thing is only valuable if you do this, right? This becomes more valuable when you do this. So they play together and it moves the dollar amount and the level they appreciate you significantly higher up the chain. And again, I'm saying this because the big fours are masters at this. Like this is why they're worth $40 billion more than the rest of all of you combined, because they've got great structure to not only their culture, their pipeline, they have all that, but they've got a great structure for how they sell an initial service, increase the overall appreciation for an implementation, and then also making sure that they have the monthly recurring revenue piece on the back end so that they raise the overall LTV of all their clients. And that is what I want to do to help revolutionize the small business accounting space. I hope you've enjoyed the 7 lessons you can learn from the Big Four to grow your firm fast. If you enjoyed this, drop a comment down below. It would mean the absolute world to me. And remember that only you can create your dream firm, but we are here to help you every single step of the way. Have a fantastic rest of your workday, and I am very much looking forward to hopefully seeing each and every single one of you inside of the Dream Firms Network in the not so distant future. See ya!